Hi, everyone. It's 12:30. We're going to give maybe just a couple of minutes for any others to join us, and then we'll get started. So just hang tight, and we will dive in maybe in about a minute. Really glad to have you here. Since we've got a good number of folks on, I thought I'd go ahead and do my introduction, tell you a little bit about who I am, what I do, and what we're going to try to do today. So let's dive in, and then we'll kind of move on from there. My name is Nadine Gabai-Botero. I am the president of Focus Fundraising. It's a fundraising consulting firm. It's been around for 10 years. I specialize in major gifts, in board development, and in working to really move organizations' fundraising programs sort of from one place to another level, whether it's diving in more deeply, expanding to new donor bases, or kind of really figuring out how to get to your next place. So I'm based in the DC area, but I work with organizations nationally, and really love this work, and I've been in fundraising for 25 years. So today's session is a fundraising discussion, which you couldn't have a more broad topic, but what we've done is we're going to do some breakout groups to allow you all to kind of connect with a smaller group of about 6 people. Those are going to be random. We have some questions to guide you. So when you get to your session, you'll see it's a pretty decent amount of questions. I would say anywhere from 2 to 4 questions. You do not have to cover them all. Frankly, you don't have to cover these questions, although I think it's helpful to have some kind of guide when you're in your breakouts. They are going to cover broadly the topics of donor engagement and communication. That's going to be our first breakout, so that's kind of the broad umbrella. Then we're going to talk about programs and services. And all of this is with a fundraising lens. So, and frankly, with a COVID lens, because that's the world in which we live. So donor engagement and communications is first, programs and services is second, and the third one is finances and budgeting. So I thought this would be a good way to kind of cover a lot of bases, but also give us some structure as we're talking about, you know, everyone's really dealing with our current fundraising climate in different ways. For some of you that were really used to connecting with your donors and sharing your program impact in person, it's been a bigger shift. And for others, you know, it's been a little easier, but still you've got to connect with donors no matter what. So that's really, I want to hear from you. So one thing I will say is, as you are in your breakout group, designate somebody to be kind of taking notes and perhaps being willing to speak on behalf. I'm not going to call on anybody, but you know, would really like to hear what you all are experiencing and thinking, and we'll come back together. I will add that I'm going to jump into groups randomly, so please don't, you know, I'm not there to like speak necessarily. I want to listen. And happy to offer input, but really want you to have that time to talk amongst yourselves. Okay, last things. The first breakout is going to be 12 minutes because I do want you all to have an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Because you're going to be with the same group, we're going to shorten the next one's 10 and then 8 minutes. So just so you kind of have a sense of how much time you'll be talking. And Laura is on with us from the catalog. And she is, sorry, Laura Rosenbaum, who's right there. So if you have any tech issues, please do send her a note. And I think that's it. Laura, anything else I'm missing?
No, I'm going to put the questions in the chat for the first breakout session, and then I can split everyone up.
All right, see you all in a bit. Hey everyone. Well, we had a really nice discussion. I hope you all did too. I wanted to just now, let's take a few minutes. So that was on sort of communications and donor engagement. I'd love to hear from folks, you know, some of what you heard and what resonated. Feel free to just sort of jump in, dive in. Oh, come on.
Okay, so I'll call someone else. I joined my group a little bit late, but Annalise Quinn was talking about what sounded like a very successful virtual event that lasted only 15 minutes. So that might be interesting for people to hear about.
It's funny, I was just on a call with a number of consultants, and we all, we shared that it was actually a client of mine who's had a great event, and it was a half an hour long. It was in the evening. It started at 7 or at 7:30, and it was over in half an hour. It was very well executed. They had actually worked on securing gifts and commitments to give in advance. So most of the work happened outside of that half an hour window. And you know, what they were able to do was kind of really show the enthusiasm, because they ended up raising about $225,000, and about $180,000 of that was committed in advance, either corporate sponsors or individuals who had sort of said, yeah, you know what, I'm willing to give. They had a text to give element to it, so you could see in real time the dollars kind of going up. So it felt very active. And they continued the fundraising after the fact, so to get folks to sort of jump on the bandwagon. Anything else? Let's hear, what other things did you hear that worked well?
Happy to jump in and share back from our group. Hi, I'm Gabby Majewski. It's a pleasure to meet you all. In our group, and certainly not my organization, but there has been a much more concerted effort on making actual phone calls and just outreach to historical supporters, not with any asks in mind, but for the aim of just checking in and seeing how folks were faring pretty early in the pandemic, and that led to a greater response and interest in engagement from those folks, and led to some really good communication. So thereafter, there was a video from the CEO to the donor base, and social media and newsletters since, as well as for kind of a virtual event shift. I think the investment there in hiring a production company to really execute that event and see how that will work, with fingers crossed.
Great. Another thing that I heard in the session I was in was talking about the future, and planning for and thinking about sort of what happens post-COVID programmatically, from a fundraising perspective. Not that you're in there planning an event for, you know, whatever 2021, but having that be part of your discussion. And I thought that was really interesting, to be able to sort of kind of start embracing that and bringing that to your donors as well.
I have a question, if that's okay. Not really sharing what the group said, but it was for those of you who have had a successful virtual fundraising event, do you find a certain time of the day to be more successful than others? And what was the thought process that went into thinking about when you would actually do the event?
So if I can jump in here, so Culmer Clinic is a small health clinic, and every year it's big fundraising event in June, which is sort of halfway in our fiscal year, is a international food and wine tasting event. It brings in usually around 45,000. When I came on board in February, they had wanted to try and get 50,000 this year, like to raise it, and then of course COVID hit. And we, you know, our events committee came together, largely volunteer, to say, you know, what do we do? Do we just postpone it? Do we, you know, but we decided to do a virtual event. But then there had been some pushback about it being, you know, oh, I was on a virtual event for my son's graduation. It just took forever. It was just like so long, you know, people were just clicking out, and then there was Facebook things, and so we decided to do something really short, 15 minutes. And it was a virtual toast, and it was a recorded virtual toast. Myself as executive director, I talked a little bit. The chairman of the board talked a little bit. We literally had a toast together, and we let people know ahead of time, about 3 weeks ahead of time, that we're, save the date. We're still doing something virtual. Let's just raise a glass, just to say thank you to to everybody for supporting Care for All in the community. And so on the actual day, we did a takeover of the web page, so that the web page was a little different, and it highlighted the toast. It had the we were launching at 7 o'clock that evening, like if we had it in real time, like in terms of on like if everyone had been there in person. And we also had a invitation to, at a certain amount of giving, you could join a virtual wine tasting right after. So it was, a 15-minute toast. We had different links on our web page to, like, we did a real makeshift tour of telemedicine, what it looked like, and it was just literally going to people's houses, and here's the nurse practitioner, here's the nurse, here's the interpreter, here's the scheduler. It was just like this really makeshift, no big production, but it really got a lot of hits. People were so fascinated to see what we were doing and that we actually were doing something, with our, because we were closed as a on-site clinic. So I think that don't give up on the idea of doing a virtual, but I think you have to modify and make it a little bit more kind of fun or different. And we actually exceeded what we imagined we were going to get. Like, we ended up with something like 54,000 as opposed to 50,000 we had. And in fact, when I did a projected budget at the beginning of June, I was coming in at 25 at the most. So we were really, amazed. And it was really all these little things that we did. We had pictures of all our staff, with a big thank you. And, we just jazzed up our webpage just this one day, and then went back to the normal thing. So.
I do think that the focus and really kind of spotlighting it, and short, I think it has to be short. 15 minutes I haven't heard of, but even, 15 minutes, half an hour, I think that's all the attention span can do. All right, guys, we're going to split back out. We're going to talk about programs and services in this one, really looking about how your programs are evolving. But remember, we always have this fundraising lens. So we want to know how your programs are evolving, but then how do you talk about those with your donors? And also, really want to hear what's resonating. So, all right, this one's going to be a little shorter, 10 minutes. So look forward to hearing what you come up with.
All right, looks like we have everyone back together, Nadine.
Great. Hi, everyone. Well, I hope that was a good discussion. It was really interesting for me, the group that I was in this time. It's almost like we didn't speak as much about sort of traditional fundraising, although we were starting to go there. We spent a lot of time on the impact of sort of the Black Lives Matter and the racial justice movement, and how in some ways, while this period started so heavily focused on COVID starting in March, there was this kind of shift that, depending on your organization, depending on your mission and who you reach, in some ways that almost took over it could be in a really wonderful way. So I don't know, did anybody else kind of talk about that from a programmatic standpoint?
This is Zainab. We didn't really talk about Black Lives Matter, but we did talk about addressing some of the social emotional impacts that, COVID has on, I think majority of our group worked with students and young groups. So that's something that we kind of tried to address, that social emotional impact that COVID had.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great example of something that donors can likely really get behind and see. For some folks, sometimes it's hard to convey your mission in terms of, well, if you don't give money, if we don't raise X, Y will happen. And we're seeing that in many ways. We're seeing that with the digital divide and the disparities with young people trying to learn and just coming at it from such different places. So I think that the question is do you have an effective way to talk to your donors about what happens if the work you're trying to do doesn't happen? And so part of that is kind of detailing your case, because that's really what a case for support is, you know, this is the challenge, this is the issue that we as a world, as a universe face, this is what our organization is doing to combat it, and this is how you can be part of that solution. So somehow you got to break down the work you're doing in a way that kind of conveys urgency and conveys impact, and the fact that, you know, you can be even more successful, but you need the investment of support to do that.
I think I would, if I could just speak to that briefly, our program directly addresses the social emotional piece of girls' development. But I think as a development person, one of my greatest challenges is expanding accessibility among our community, where we're you know, supporting those with the highest amount of need at a certain level, let's say a quarter or a third of our community. But given the current circumstances, that need is going to increase. And we, you know, want to appeal to our donors. Not only, you know, is the urgency of the situation and isolation and the stress, anxiety, all of that going to impact children, but also those who need it the most, you know, that need is going to increase. And so hopefully, you know, our donors will rise to the appeal of the social emotional piece, but also the need that's increasing.
Anybody else want to add something about your recent sort of breakout? All right, you know what, let's do our third breakout. It's about 1:10, so we're going to go to the third one. So this one, we're focusing on financing and budgeting. So looking at, I know we're all, you know, all of your organizations have different fiscal years. So for some, you know, March was kind of the last quarter for those of you who do a July to June. So you probably were already even in budgeting in terms of FY21. For others, especially the ones that are in calendar year fiscals, you're probably, you know, you were just at the beginning, maybe you've done a mid-year correction. So wanted to really understand how you are shifting gears, and then also in terms of an eye to year end, because year end is so important for budgeting. So wanting to have you talk a little bit about, have you started that process, and what are you anticipating, and are you making changes now to your budgets, etc. So we'll go off and I think we're doing 8 minutes this time, and then we'll go from there, come back together.
I think we're all back together now.
Wonderful. So that was an interesting discussion, and I'm curious if there were some elements that resonated with you all about sort of budgeting and finances and shifting gears, and also planning for going forward. Anything that you all want to share? You know, the group that I was with talked about you know, really thinking about year end. One of the questions was about timing, and, you know, is it right to maybe put off or postpone an ask that normally might have happened in the fall or now or even at year end, and wait for the spring? And my suggestion back was, you know, you want to be as donor centric as possible, which means sharing an opportunity to give, but letting your donor come back to you with, you know, this isn't the right time, but I want to revisit it in the spring, or yes, actually, I do want to make a gift now. But giving them options and not closing off these doors of potential timeframes is really where you want to be thinking, because it allows your donor to kind of indicate to you what works best.
This is Zainab. One thing that I got out of that last meeting is that one of the members had 3 different budgets. One that was aggressive, one that was in the middle, and then one that was not so aggressive, based on how things pan out. I think that's a really good idea. And we could structure our organization. It's kind of like a preemptive strike, per se, to kind of prepare ourselves for what happens. So it's like pre-planning for something that for what may happen, and then we can kind of address it easily as it comes up.
I absolutely couldn't agree more. I think having contingency planning is absolutely key. I just wanted to share that I put my email in the chat. If you all want to reach out to me with a question, I'm more than happy to answer it, or stay in touch. Just send me a note and I'll add you to my list just of organizations and people that I keep in touch with. And you know, like I said, and I do make sort of 15 or half an hour increments available to folks that I've connected with. So if you're interested in that as well, just shoot me a note and I'm happy to respond and find a time. But this was great. Really appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And Laura, thank you so much for your time and coordination.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nadine. So our next session is fundraising during COVID-19, which starts at 1:30. So we're just giving you a minute to recollect before joining the next Zoom call. But we'll see y'all soon.
Great.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.